Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Viral's Movie Reviews, the show where I take a look at movies that you guys suggest, I go to the movies and see, or I feel like discussing. And since we are in the depths of Woobruary, I kind of mentioned Method Man and Redman's sort of film and music relationship in my Gravediggers review.
What the fuck is going on? Ain't you supposed to be dead?
Obviously, there's that Wu-Tang show going on that again kind of happens to be happening at the same time as this year's Woobruary. So I figured, why not talk about a Wu-Tang visual passion project akin to when I talked about Ghostface's 12 Reasons to Die comic from 2013. This is a movie that was released a year prior that feels like it's doing some similar wish fulfillment for a different member of the group, the creative figurehead for the group, as far as like the production style and harnessing some of those creative inspirations with the group of friends that was the RZA. A movie that was in production for a long time. There was a lot of rewrites for the script that went on back and forth. A lot of the creative hands were kind of conflicted on things, and I feel like that shows in some components of the finished product. I'm talking about the movie The Man with the Iron Fists. A movie that wasn't necessarily heavily marketed to be affiliated with the Wu-Tang Clan outside of putting the RZA's name everywhere, because he was not only the director, but one of the screenwriters with one Eli Roth.
Faced.
Along with being a core component of, obviously, the musical direction.
Me with the major, the damage, my clan understand it be flavor, gunning.
So his hand is all over this project, and the actual finished product feels akin to 12 Reasons to Die, as a piece of Wu-Tang affiliated ephemera. Similarly to that comic book, there are elements that feel parallels to each other. Some of the character ideas and some of the, revenge fantasy stuff that crops up throughout this evokes some of the energy of this, but not to a degree that I would say I like as much as this. I do like this movie to some degree. I think that it's not bad. I do like a decent amount of the cast. I love that Batista's in this. I love his character. The concept of his character is really cool. He's this guy with this bronze skin. I think you can definitely tell the RZA is loving this character, and I like how deep they go on his character. They give him this story throughout the sort of middle point in the movie that I think comes at a good point. I think it's cool that the RZA found a way to integrate, the story of a slave escaping captivity and ending up with these monks who taught him this power that he uses to try and do good, is a good hero's arc that, again, feels indicative of what I feel like the RZA was trying to do creatively in some components of his career. The reason why it's a revenge story for him feels well realized in the form of needing to make his iron fists. Obviously, I love Lucy Liu, and I love her big action set piece in the third act. I think that she kicks ass in this movie. I also think it's wild that Russell Crowe is in this movie, because this movie came out in 2012. You know what else came out in 2012 for Russell Crowe? Les Mis. And in this movie, he was only available for 10 days of filming, so I can imagine it had to have happened around the same time, because while there was a troubled pre-production, when the filming actually began, I think it was around the time it did come out. And it's wild to think about Russell Crowe going from this...
Valjean, at last, we see each other plain.
...to this.
Unfortunately, Dagger, the gears of life move inexorably in only one direction.
I'm glad to see you've adopted the philosophies of my people.
His character's kind of cool as well. His name is Jackknife, and it's a character that leans really heavy into the aesthetics that the RZA is trying to pay homage to, while also being a tribute to his cousin, ODB, who had passed away by the time of making this movie. I think that that's wild, that Russell Crowe is that guy. He's got a cool weapon. Again, a lot of the elements like the weapon design and the character stuff, the world building that happens, I think is well realized in a similar way in 12 Reasons to Die. I kind of just like it more in that, and I think it's because that's a little more contained. This is like a whole-ass universe with a lot of things that you're just signing on for the minute you see it, because it's like, all right, cool, that's an element in this universe. That's awesome. And I will say, similarly to this, and this is where the comparisons for this, and sadly enough, where I'll kind of transition from my positives to some of my negatives, will end. The action in the movie is pretty well choreographed. I like the fight scenes here. I think that there's some fun camera stuff in the Lucy Liu scene, especially, that I think is fun. You can feel Tarantino's presence because he presented this movie, and it kind of feels, again, akin to something I'll talk about a lot in some of the negatives and stuff, but it feels like a movie from 2006 in 2012. Like, if you like that aesthetic, then you're gonna love that part of this movie. And I don't think it's bad, and that's why I like some of it in, like, the choreographed stuff with, especially, again, Lucy Liu's scene. And I like that touch to the presentation overall, you know, when they're building his Iron Fist, that kind of has that feel to those movies that I think is nice. Like, there's some fun, campy B-movie styles to the camera work that I enjoy. The direction, by and large, you can tell the RZA really enjoys the energy of, like, a martial arts movie from a cinematography perspective, and I think that he tried to capture that in a pretty amicable way here, and work with a lot of the creative hands. I'm sure Eli Roth kind of also had his hand in it, especially with some of the gore, because this is a gory-ass movie, which I didn't think about going into it. I was like, oh, it's an R-rated movie with the RZA doing, you know, martial arts. There's probably going to be some blood. The Wu-Tang game I've been playing for this month has been pretty bloody. But yeah, damn, there's some pretty gory stuff in this movie. With that said, it feels like an amicable amount of gore. Because in hindsight, I mean, Tarantino movies are pretty bloody. Eli Roth movies are, like, notoriously gory, and this feels like a middle ground between those two that has some pretty intense gore in pockets, but it's very contained amidst everything that's going on in this movie. It's done in a way that kind of reins in where I think Eli Roth goes a bit far in movies like parts of the Cabin Fever and Hostel series. Again, there's a component of that within the sort of rounding out of the RZA's character that I think is done really well, involving Batista's character. And to pivot it into my negatives, I'm doing a lot of this in this camera because I kind of had a hard time really pulling together the thoughts I was trying to say about my issues with this movie, because, again, for an action movie, the action works, but the movie itself falls apart with its story components. You know, you've got the RZA's character, who becomes what it feels like an homage to old martial arts movies that inspired the Wu-Tang Clan. He's this blacksmith in a town who doesn't want to necessarily make weapons for as good at the craft as he is. In tandem with that, you've got his world in this village that ends up being the epicenter for this warring clans and their conquest for this gold prize. But that, in tandem with the world that they're trying to build around it, has a lot of elements that pull away from the main story, in my opinion. It's kind of a messy bit, and I think that while the movie tries to bring ahead these components throughout its third act, they still feel relatively dissected from each other, in my opinion. Because there are components with, like, the warring heads of the clans that have their own personal touch that feels directly removed from the RZA and his working with this brothel in this war to save this village, which you could argue is sort of a component of this style of movie. I mean, hell, it feels like the main source of this warring clan thing is more to be a catalyst for the action than to really substantiate the world. But they also made, like, a sequel to this that is supposed to build off of that, so I don't know. You know, Jamie Chung, his love interest, also feels kind of sidelined in a way that there's also a sequence involving the prostitutes in the brothel being a part of the assault that I think starts off framed in a very Eli Roth way, but evolves into a better action set piece, in my opinion. Again, there's some cool visual ideas in the imagery that I think is done well. It's a stylish movie, you know, akin to a movie like Smokin' Aces, or like Kung Fu Hustle in some of its presentation. Not quite to that degree, but you can tell it definitely takes inspiration from that in a similar way to Kung Fu Hustle. And those are the moments of, like, it feeling like a 2006 movie in 2012 done well. And while I think it's interesting that they do try to build a whole-ass world in this movie that does get, I'm assuming branched out more in sequels. I don't think that the roots here are as interesting to me as what I would say are the RZA's inspirations that he's taking from for this movie. I like that the RZA gets the chance to do some fun wish fulfillment for him. You know, again, you can tell he's having a good time, but I personally don't think I like this movie as much as other movies of its ilk, / like it as much as other Wu-Tang passion projects that have been cropping up in the 2010s. Which you could argue is indicative of the RZA solo material itself. Waka waka. And similarly to 12 Reasons to Die, you can see the RZA storytelling style that I feel like, again, he just kind of does better in 12 Reasons to Die. The sort of narrative-driven, Western-inspired narration is done in both, and I just think it's done better on this / the album that this comic has a companion with. And those are my thoughts on the RZA passion project, The Man with the Iron Fist. I haven't seen its sequel. I don't know if I will. Again, I liked this movie. I'd give it like a 6 out of 10. It's solid enough. It's got components that I enjoy, some that I don't. I probably would watch it again, but like not for a long time. I'd rather watch like Kung Fu Hustle. I haven't watched that in a while. Watching that definitely made me want to watch this. But those are my thoughts. Have you seen the movie? If you have, let me know your comments down below. If you like this review, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 4 vids a week, and again, as of filming this and posting this, we are in the middle of Woo-Brewery, so I've got other Wu-Tang related stuff coming out. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.